Good morning and welcome back to Dr. Logic Awkwardly Does Logic. We've talked about truth, we've talked about validity, we've talked about a whole bunch of notions in between. Today, I'm going to give you a very short corollary about invalidity. So invalidity is just the negation of validity. Validity is truth at every world, in every model, on every frame. Invalidity is going to be the negation of that. So falsity at some world, in some model, on some frame. What I'm going to show is that there is a really nice relationship between invalidity and satisfiability of the negation of a formula. And if we consider the satisfiability of a negation, that negation essentially propagates down all the way through and gets us from the satisfiability of that formula to the invalidity of its negation. So let me make this explicit, what it is that we're going to be proving. We have this lovely little corollary, and it follows directly from the definition that we gave in the previous video. It says some well-formed formula phi is going to be invalid if its negation is satisfiable. So this is an if-then statement. So if we want to prove it, what we do is we start by assuming the antecedent. So suppose that not phi is satisfiable. What does this mean? Take a look at the definition of satisfiability and write it down. So that just means that there is a model M and world W such that not phi is true at W in this model. Now, from this, we know that phi, so the formula without the negation, cannot be valid on this model. And this just comes from the definition of validity in a model which says that phi has to be true at every world. So we know that phi is not true, not valid, sorry, in M. Remember, this is the way that we write that, because there is a world where it is false, because at that world, the negation is true. So there is a world where phi is false. Now, this model is built on a particular frame. Since we have found a model and we could create a world in that model where phi is false, it has to be the case that it is not going to be valid on this frame either. So it follows that phi is not valid on this frame either because of this model and this world right here. Now, in our hierarchy, we then talked about classes of models. We are going to talk about a class of models next, but we're going to talk about it. We're going to collapse the fourth level and the fifth level, because it's important to note that we can talk about the class of all frames. So the strongest notion of validity that we have is, in a sense, a special case of this notion of validity on a class. And what we just need to know is that because F is a frame, it is a member of the class of all frames. So if we have a frame where phi is not valid on that frame, we know that phi cannot be valid at all because we have found a model and a world in that model where its negation is true. QED. What's important about this particular proof is recognizing that it basically just relies on the definitions that we've given. So we start off with an assumption that we have a formula, this not phi, that is satisfiable. And the very first thing that you need to do is then go and look at the definition and write down the relevant clause. This is what definitions are for. This is how we start proving things about these systems, the very general facts about modal truth and modal semantics that we will continue to be looking at throughout the rest of this series. So there's a quick little corollary for you. Hope you enjoyed that. We've got more results coming up next, but these are going to deal with specifically the notions of necessity and possibility. So we'll start getting a little bit more into the modal stuff, be a little bit more interesting. Take care and see you then. Cheers.